Sten, we're live.
Thank you, Larry, the Liberty Guy. Welcome to In the Dugout this beautiful spring day in Rhode Island. Mike Stenhouse, your host. We're in the dugout. Today, I'll wear the Rhode Island standard Rhode Island cap. Since there really is, we'll know by the end of this evening whether or not Rhode Island will be heading down what I might think could be a path that we can't recover from. And that's this Rhode Island version of the Green New Deal. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, today we have, coming up in about 10 minutes, we're going to have Judge Robert Flanders. You know him. He's been on the show many times. He's going to talk about a legal court clause, lawsuit clause in this Green New Deal bill and talk about whether it's constitutional, whether it's standard issue stuff, or whether there's something really wrong with what the left is trying to do here. So we'll talk to Judge Flanders about that. I'll have some commentary before and after. And also then in the bottom of the hour and second half of the show, we'll be joined, as we are every Tuesday late afternoon, by our own Justin Katz, our center's research director, editor of the Ocean State Current. And we'll go through his updates this week and legislative review of the good, the bad, and the interesting bills that are in the General Assembly this year. Okay. All right, just a few quick hits before we get into our main topics, if I may. First of all, tremendous feedback from yesterday's show. We've had comments in the chat, comments after the fact on the video, emails, one of our highest viewership, both live and after the fact shows. We've had people call us out of the blue saying, thanks for doing that show and what you're doing. I'd like to send you guys a gift. You know, we survive on private donations. You know, the left likes to make it think we're funded by the evil Koch brothers or something like that. We're not. We rely on private donations from people like you. But anyway, the response has been terrific. And I'm here to tell you that, hold on, I just have to respond to Judge Flanders because he's looking for the Zoom in. So I may have to do that. Larry, if you have his cell number, if you could get it to him on that, or his email. Okay, because I got to talk to our millions of fans out here, right? I mean, millions upon millions of fans. I mean, they can't be distracted like I was just. Anyway, your voices matter. You know, you heard Blake Filippi yesterday say, call your representative. Many of you did that. Radio shows were replaying, today, conversations back and forth from lawmakers on the defensive on this. Our center's website, which we'll go visit in a minute and show you the form you can fill out that sends emails. We've sent over 11,000 emails to the governor's office and legislative leaders expressing your opposition, not our opposition, your opposition to this bill. And one thing first, there was some radio personality today trying to say that this bill was raised first. We raised this issue first last week, the day that the committee, the House Environmental Committee released this. You heard about this bill here first. This is what we do. This is why In the Dugout is valuable to the state. We will cover stories many times before anyone else covers it, and many times when nobody else will cover it, because we're not afraid. We're not an insider. We don't need to be invited to the cocktail parties or to the press conferences. We're here to defend your rights, to defend freedom, so that we can have a more prosperous state. That's our name. And we are undeterred. We will do it respectfully. We will do it persistently, but we will do it. And we are not afraid. We will cover any topic that we think infringes on your freedoms and our state's overall prosperity. That is our mission. And you will often hear it first, or sometimes even only, here on In the Dugout. So spread the word. Please subscribe yourself to the button. Spread the word to your friends about this show. Have them tune in right now. We're Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, 4 to 5 p.m. Monday, yesterday we had a special edition show because of this bill that's being voted upon, well, being brought up on the House floor right now. Now, let me tell you why your voices are mattering and why the left and why the lawmakers are hearing you. First of all, the leftist activists led by Aaron Regenberg are now demonstrating, a whole 20 of them. I mean, they'll get front page coverage tomorrow like it was a Trump 10,000 person rally or something. But whole 20 of them are outside. I guess they're doing General Assembly duties at the Veterans Auditorium right next to the State House. But anyway, a whole 20 of them are out there protesting, urging lawmakers to pass this Rhode Island version of the Green New Deal, House Bill 5445. The Senate version of this bill, I don't know the number offhand, passed recently. So if it passes the House tonight, there is another formality that has to happen, but it will likely soon go to Governor McKee's desk. Now, they are hearing you. That's why they're out there protesting today, the activists. But I know that Speaker Shekarchi, no, we talked about this yesterday with Blake Filippi. Speaker Shekarchi, Speaker Mattiello would never have let this bill come forward. This bill had been in there for the last 3 or 4 years. Mattiello, he was partially right in that he was a firewall against the progressive left. He was a sieve. He had a lot of holes. He let a lot of stuff through, but he wouldn't let certain other stuff through. But Joseph Shekarchi is different, much more progressive, much more just as political as Mattiello. And we had heard that the pressure was building on him. A lot of reps were going to him saying, hey, listen, we're getting a lot of heat. We're getting phone calls. We're getting emails, social media. We're getting pounded on this bill. What should we do? And apparently from our inside source up there on Smith Hill, he is doubling down, is Speaker Shekarchi, and he apparently sent out an email to his caucus, something, and he's dug in even harder, something to the effect, I want this bill passed, get it done. Okay, so he's feeling the pressure to the point where he had to put out that kind of plea. So you keep up the work, you keep spreading the word on that page, rightfreedom.org/energy choices. Tell all your friends, keep the pressure on. Now, we're also hearing from our source that lobbyists, there's lobbyists on both sides of this issue, obviously, that it's not, remember, today's vote is less about defeating this bill, right? Defeating it outright. But even if they lose the vote, even if we lose the vote and the bill passes, if we can get 25, 26 people or in that vicinity to be opposed to vote no, that means we would have a chance to sustain a potential Governor McKee veto. I cannot believe, even though he's been completely silent on this, and that's to his discredit, that showing no leadership. Governor McKee has showed no leadership on this issue. The business community has not weighed in on this issue, but if Governor McKee does eventually issue a veto, we will need 26 votes on our side to sustain that veto and kill the bill effectively for this year anyway. And apparently it's going to be really close to that 26 number. We'll know by later tonight. There's going to be a long discussion, a long debate on the bill itself. There'll be many amendments offered, and there'll be debates on those amendments. And don't forget, at some point today, Larry Liberty guy is monitoring live on Capitol TV the proceedings on the House floor. And if Leader Filippi gets up and speaks at some point during our show today, we will immediately cut in and listen to a few minutes of Blake Filippi's comments if it happens. So be ready at any time. We could be jumping over there for a live look in. But again, it's close. It's close because your voice matters. There's been talk about this on the radio all day in many news outlets. Of course, the larger news outlets refuse to cover this story. because they're just lackeys for the government and the left on this. But still, there's been enough coverage and enough pressure put on by you to force some media coverage and to force a lot of lawmakers to reconsider how they're going to vote on this. And apparently, with Blake Filippi's doing a yeoman's job, trying to one-on-one convince people, but your voices have apparently convinced a lot of other people, Democrats, obviously, to vote no on this. There is one Republican in the House, unfortunately, who apparently is going to vote yes on that. That's Barbara Ann Fenton Fung. And that's the irony of this, right? That the Speaker of the House, who would not have let this bill come to a floor vote, was beaten by a Republican who's going to support this legislation. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's a crazy world. The business associations have been silent too. We tried to get them to sign a coalition letter, but let me tell you, the business association this state are so timid. They're so afraid that their handouts or special favor is going to be yanked if they raise their hand to object on any kind of bill, that they just refuse to work publicly. They might privately be working behind the scenes to say they support or oppose a bill. But it's just a shame, and it's one of the reasons our government has to change in this state. The fear of retribution in this state is enormous. It's everywhere. People are afraid. Business owners are afraid. Business association leaders are afraid. Chambers of commerce are largely afraid. Now, one other thing you should know is that, you know who's drooling over this bill? Is the lawyers' lobby, who are powerful. They're one of the special interests, and the left-wing activists. And we're going to tell you about that in just a few minutes when we bring on Judge Flanders, who I see is now on hold. We'll get to him and to the judge in just a moment. One other thing about this bill you need to know, that there's incredible government union support and private sector union support of this bill. Because the way it would work, this bill, which would basically demand or mandate that buildings and homes be refurbished, guess who does all that work? The trade unions, right? The trades and the government worker unions, the electricians, and whoever else is out there. The inspectors. Think of all the work that would need to be done, unionized work that would need to be done. Imagine if every home and every business over the next 10, 20, 30 years had to be refurbished at $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 per building or more for commercial buildings. Imagine all the work, all the money and business and dues that then hiring that will go to make government unions and private sector unions even more powerful. And that's not even to mention the lawsuits, which we're going to talk about right now. So that's just a quick introduction. Well, let me just cover two other things here, just very quickly, and then we'll get to Judge Flanders. Judge, if you could just hold for one moment. So I like to do some funnies, as you know. So here's one. You know how times have changed. It used to be we liked the president because of his motivational words. 70, 80 years ago, words that we only heard over the radio. Now we like presidents when they send us free money, or what we think is free money, right? Right here. And speaking of that free money that's in that check that's coming, have you gotten your $1,400 yet per person? I know many Rhode Islanders have started to get it. Have you got yours? It's starting to come in. But that's $1.9 trillion stimulus, 143 million taxpayers. So after that's 13,000 and a quarter, 13 and a quarter thousand per taxpayer. If you deduct the 1,400, it's still, the cost on us is almost $12,000 per taxpayer. Is that a good deal? See, that's what I mean. It's not free money. You think it's free money. Now, you may not pay that $12,000 back. Your kids and grandkids might. The way things are going today, I don't know. Maybe we'll never pay it back. But still, if we ever pay it back, that's the cost. So, there really is no such thing as a free lunch. All right, let's bring on Judge Flanders and welcome him back to In the Dugout. Bob, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Glad to be with you, Mike.
You're looking very rustic in your beige and your hat. Are you going out hunting today or something? You look like a
No,
shotgun out in the
I,
English countryside or something.
I bagged some partridge early this morning, but my hunting is over for the day.
What's that cap? Does it say anything on there? Or is it just a generic cap?
No, it's a generic cap. It's the beige that goes with the rest of the outfit.
Yes, it does. I got to say, you're very, very well coordinated today. Are all judges good dressers?
The black robe hides a lot of sins,
Okay.
including in apparel.
All right, I'm going to bring up here and then just give you the open floor to talk about in the bill that we're discussing, this Green New Deal for Rhode Island, H5445, which is being debated and voted upon as we speak in the House. There's a clause in there that I've never seen in a bill before, and here it is. And it basically opens the door wide open for lawsuits. I've underlined and highlighted a few things, but anyway, just what are your general comments on what you saw? You had a chance to look at it earlier today.
Yeah. The thing that's to me remarkable is that it broadens standing, which is the legal concept that whoever brings a lawsuit has to allege that they've been personally wronged by whatever they're claiming is inappropriate or needs to be corrected or needs to be compensated. But what's interesting and remarkable really about this bill is that any Rhode Island resident, in addition to the Attorney General and any entity in Rhode Island, nonprofit, for-profit, whatever, any kind of organization that's registered with the Secretary of State can bring a civil action to enforce any of the provisions in the bill, regardless, presumably, of whether they have been in any way hurt or injured by whatever it is.
Everybody has standing then, right?
Everybody has standing.
Have you ever seen anything like this before?
I haven't. And what's alarming about it constitutionally is that normally the judiciary doesn't get into the business of giving out advisory opinions with very limited exceptions. There are provisions in the Constitution for advisory opinions for the governor and certain legislative leadership where there's pending legislation. But otherwise, the courts are very leery about giving out basically advisory opinions to people who are just curious and have claims that they are wondering about how a court would resolve them if they ever had a real claim. But this would open the doors on that and raise constitutional questions about whether it's trying to empower the judiciary to do things, to issue orders and rulings and decisions that are far beyond what the Constitution limits judges to doing, which is deciding contested cases. And so that to me is the most alarming of the things that I looked at.
Isn't it also empowering every hack lawyer, every advocacy group, legal leftist foundation just to raise money and earn fees by filing frivolous lawsuit after frivolous lawsuit after frivolous lawsuit, whether or not their client has been harmed or not? Isn't that who we're really empowering here?
Of course, because you need, by and large, most people would turn to lawyers to bring these kinds of suits. And the legislation does say that the court can award attorney's fees and the costs of the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Presumably only if the suit is successful.
If you win, right.
But still, it's really opening the doors to anybody and everybody in the state, including lawyers and their clients and anybody who wants to bring litigation and requiring whoever is sued to pay the costs if they're in any way successful.
Let me ask you this. So you served how many years as an associate justice of the Rhode Island Supreme Court?
8.5 years.
8.5 years on the highest court in our state. You've been a lawyer for probably 30, 40 years, right? Or more, right?
Now, 46 years.
40, so, oh God, all right. Okay. I thought you were only a 40-year-old guy. Sorry. Um, have you, well, I know you've never seen any clause this wide open in any legislation that you've either ruled upon or litigated for or against. Have you just ever seen in any piece of legislation some kind of enforcement mechanism that speaks so directly to lawsuit actions?
Well, it's not uncommon for legislation to provide for specific remedies, such as the ones that are provided for here, but always it's with the limitation that the person bringing the suit or the entity bringing the suit has to demonstrate damage. Now, it's possible, Mike, that if this bill were ever enacted into law and it was challenged or someone brought a lawsuit, that the courts would interpret it in a way to narrow it to only people who have standing, even though the language in the bill is much broader than that. So they could apply a very narrowing interpretation of this bill to say that unless you have standing and can show personal injury to you or whoever the plaintiff is, then we're not going to entertain the suit and throw it out. But that's not contained in the legislation itself. That would require the judiciary to step in and apply a very narrowing construction to the bill.
So as we discussed with Leader Blake Filippi, Minority Leader, House GOP Leader Blake Filippi yesterday, it appears that this clause is meant to say that if anybody feels like any agency of the state is not doing everything it can, everything, which means TCI, gas tax, everything. It means basically, if you don't do everything possible, regardless of the cost to society, the economic harm to families, businesses, or the state, if you as a state agency, or even as an individual or business, to modify your buildings or your heating system or whatever to meet these new standards, you can be sued by anybody else who has such a complaint. I mean, that is just, what would you call that? That is not justice, right? Well, that's kind of a tyranny of the courts. That's kind of it's an indirect brown shirt socialist enforcement. What would you call something like that, where anybody can be punished by anybody else potentially in the courts, and it opens the door to that if you don't comply with these Green New Deal mandates? What is that? It's not justice.
Yeah, it's a free for all, and it's inviting frivolous litigation. It's inviting anybody. We all know that there are so-called gadflies out there who love to file lawsuits, and this would open the courthouse door to such litigation, and potentially tie the courts in knots from dealing with the usual workload of real criminal and civil cases that they need to address. So it could really burden a system that is already struggling with COVID and has a backlog of cases that they've got to catch up with because of all the delays that occurred due to the pandemic. So yeah, this would be a free-for-all, and could have all kinds of pernicious consequences for the state and our system of justice.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just accidentally sent you a text, and I meant to send it to somebody else. I'm one of those guys that can multitask. Now, Representative Patricia Morgan called yesterday, and she's going to put in an amendment to remove this section, just totally remove it from from the legislation. That'll be her amendment. Of course, it will fail. The Democrats will vote her down. But let me ask this. Her argument is, of course, the larger argument here is that we're ceding this bill would cede power to an unelected group of bureaucrats called the Economic Climate Change Committee or something. Unelected bureaucrats, unaccountable to the people. And that with this, and that by removing this enforcement, it would make that committee more advisory versus a committee that can impose a mandate. I mean, why would we want unelected third-party ideologues imposing mandates on us unchecked? So would you agree with that, that her claim that this section takes this law from one of being simply aspirational and makes it an enforceable mandate, lest you want to suffer legal implications?
Yes, because this provision that we've been talking about gives enforcement powers to whoever thinks that the law is not being complied with, and basically puts it in the hands of the courts to try and say whether the claim by anybody is a valid one, and can issue all sorts of injunctions and other orders, regardless of whether the person bringing the claim can demonstrate any injury whatsoever. So taking this out would obviously deprive the courts of that enforcement mechanism, and hopefully at best have the effect of rendering this commission that you talked about as being purely advisory.
All right, we're talking with Judge Robert Flanders, former Associate Justice of the Rhode Island Supreme Court. Of course, he always admonishes me when I call him judge, because he says I'm not an active judge anymore, but still you earn that title. I'm going to give you that title always out of respect. You are a practicing attorney. And we're reviewing this legal clause in the Green New Deal bill, as we're calling it for Rhode Island, H5445, which is under floor consideration right as we speak up on Smith Hill. Now, have you ever heard of a legal group called the Conservation Law Foundation?
Yes, I have.
Apparently they are, despite the name, they're a pretty left-leaning radical group. Is that your understanding?
Well, I know they've litigated a lot of environmental cases, and they try and get their oar in the water on any environmental issues in particular. So that's been their track record.
Well, according to Representative Patricia Morgan, they wrote this legislation. They wrote this legal clause, which would basically open the door for them, anybody in state, or conceivably, I think as the law was written, as the wording is written, any out-of-state group that just sets up some kind of dummy corporation in the state would also have standing to sue. Is that your understanding?
Yes, there's no limits on who would have standing, as long as you're here in Rhode Island in one form or another, be it an entity or an individual. The law seems to purport to give you standing to bring this lawsuit. And
apparently from the Conservation Law Foundation website, I'm going to read to you a quote. Even the strongest environmental laws are toothless until they are enforced. Conservation Law Foundation achieves breakthrough results by pressuring federal and state agencies to enforce laws that are already on the books. So we've seen this many times before, where legislation is written specifically with wording to help out a special interest group. In this case, the special interest group is the Conservation Law Foundation and any left-leaning lawyer who wants to make some money on a frivolous lawsuit. Do you see this often in legislation and comes up in court cases that language was specifically inserted by special interest groups to specifically help that special interest group?
Of course, this happens. These entities and groups have lobbyists that try and make sure that their interests are protected and advanced. And one way of doing that is to provide for enforcement through lawsuits. And as I say, what's so bad about this particular bill is that it doesn't just require people who are injured in some way by whatever it is they're challenging to bring these lawsuits. It just gives anybody and everybody who has an academic interest in wanting some law enforced, regardless of whether they can demonstrate injury. And that's where it gets into constitutional and other problems. And I'd be surprised if the judiciary, even if this were passed, would allow people who really are just what I call legal gadflies to file lawsuits and cite this provision and say, we're entitled to relief here, and striking down or ordering or mandating certain behavior, even if they can't show that they've been injured by anything.
Now, what could a provision like this be so broad and vague, and when it comes to standing, which goes against our state's constitutional writings on standings, that this specific clause itself might be unconstitutional?
Yes, because it's too broad. If interpreted to mean that literally anybody can sue regardless of having any personal interest at stake or any injury that what can be demonstrated by the challenge conduct, yes, that's too broad. But as I say, the one potential saving grace is that even with such a broad provision, the courts could interpret it narrowly by saying, to save it from being unconstitutional, we're going to require that the plaintiff in whatever case is being brought must demonstrate that they've been injured in some articulable personal way, and not just having an academic interest in having the question they're presenting be decided.
All right, Judge Flanders.
But that's putting a big onus on the judges when the legislature should do its job and not allow unconstitutionally broad language to be incorporated in such a bill.
Great comment. Thank you. I promise I wouldn't keep you long. We'll let you go. We've got a few more things to discuss. I see Larry, the Liberty guy, has something for us. So Judge Flanders, thank you for weighing in on this. And we'll have you back shortly for some more legal expertise. Thanks, Judge.
Thank you all. Bye now.
Okay. Larry, the Liberty guy, is on. It means he has something for us, an update, news, flash. What do you got, Larry?
Absolutely. Always great to have Judge Flanders on the show. Representative Filippi is speaking now. So would you like me to share my screen? And
take
have
a live
everybody?
look in, sure.
That in 2030 is when we will be mandated to reduce to 45% below 1990 emissions, 9 years from now. I'll continue. To my friend, Representative Baptista, about all the tropical fish near Block Island. I've been catching mahi-mahi off Block Island since I was a kid in late August. I'm not denying that climate change exists, but the tropical fish have been around Block Island for as long as I can remember. I'm a spear fisherman.
And another false fear by the left that climate change is affecting fishing. Just fake fear, fake news.
Instead, I was listening to the debate before this. Many false points brought up by the left.
All right, let's jump back into Filippi a little later when we get into some of the other debates. So keep an eye. Let's do it again in a few minutes. Before we bring in Justin Katz, well, let me bring in Justin Katz right now because I think the first bill we're going to talk about is this bill, so we might as well talk about it together. So Justin Katz, welcome back to In the Dugout. Unmute yourself and turn on your video if you would.
It's saying I'm not allowed to start my video. Oh, there's another.
Justin, try it now.
All right, there we go.
There he is.
Oh, no, lost me.
Whoa, we pinked Justin today. You doing that on purpose?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I plugged my camera in and that was what happened.
All right, you got a cat for us today? You always, oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought given this egregious assault on our rights, I'd go back to the tricorn cat for my revolutionary sensation.
Yep, very good. That works. This is what they fought. This is what they fought against in the In the revolution, this kind of unchecked tyranny, and
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
what this is green tyranny. There's no question about it. So, Justin, I know that the first bill you were going to bring up was this H5545 as the bad bill, right?
Yep. That, and also let's not forget S0078, which is the Senate version, which is also passed.
That already passed, right?
Yeah.
All right. So before we get into your comments, let me ask you this, following up on my discussion with Judge Flanders. So the judge talked about the legal court reasons why this is bad, but there's another even more intimidating factor that we talked about and you brought up in our staff meetings recently, to this legal clause that when there is an unchecked ability or opening, when the legislation opens a door for anybody to sue anybody else who may not be following the green agenda to the T, that pretty much compels state agencies to accept almost any green deal like the TCI gas tax, no matter how bad it is for the economy. They're not even allowed to make a cost versus benefit value judgment anymore. You either take the deal or you risk getting sued. Isn't that really what this is all about? This kind of heavy-handed tyranny?
Oh, it sure is. I mean, this bill specifically makes it an obligation of every state agency to pursue this particular goal, which is just insane if you think about it. I mean, Rhode Island being so small, and this is a point several other people have made, we can have hardly any effect on climate change. It's almost like saying every agency is obligated to set as its sights dealing with asteroid impacts on the planet. I mean, it's just a crazy, they can't control it, yet they're making this a central focus above and beyond everything else they could possibly do. And it won't necessarily obligate us to any particular policy, but then there's going to be this council that will have authority to help set policies, and that will predictably be run by radicals, I would expect.
Yeah, all right, we're going to get some of those other points in a second, but I just want to reinforce, and I know you and I agree, I want to make this point to our viewers, that this legal clause we're talking about, and Representative Patricia Morgan is going to put in an amendment to remove this clause, but this enforcement legal clause in this bill not only will create countless frivolous lawsuits by almost anybody and tying up the court system, a free-for-all as judge, but it's going to compel agencies to accept any green deal, no matter how bad it is, or else they'll risk being sued. And that is just not the way government should work, right?
Right. Well, and not only that, I mean, it's every state agency, some that have nothing to do with energy policy or anything like that. And who knows where that could go? I mean, you could get any agency in a state deciding they have to do X, Y, or Z. RIDE decides they have to brainwash children. That's the Department of Education decides they have to brainwash children because that's the only way to get them to get to zero emissions. That kind of thing. This is just a Pandora's box of potential bad effects.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And again, I want to remind you that, our center has a very cool website that you can do what we're doing right now on it, rifreedom.org/bills right here. And you can type in the bill number. So what was the second bill number, the Senate bill? What was that number?
0078.
All right, so here are the two bills, and you can see the sponsors over here. So these are people you need to, if you're a member of their district, you need to let them know now. Call their office. And then here are the Senate sponsors. And these are all, pretty far left, and I don't know Dominic Ruggiero, Susan Sanowski necessarily, but pretty much everybody else on here is a far left socialist progressive. Wouldn't you agree, Justin, all the sponsors on this?
Yeah, it's largely a left-wing bill, that's for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, we did have one Republican vote yes in the Senate. That was Dennis Algier, the Senate Majority Leader. And we did have one Republican vote yes in the committee vote last Thursday, and that was Barbara Ann Fenton Fung. We assume she'll vote yes today on the larger bill, but we shall find out later tonight. Okay, so anything else you want to add on this bill, since you picked it as one of your, we have the good, the bad, and the interesting. These two are the bad. Anything else you'd like to add on this bill, Justin?
Well, the only thing, as you mentioned, the representatives who are pushing this forward, and the senators, it's almost a question of why would they do this to the people they're supposed to represent? They can't have any effect on the policy. There may be marginal, tiny global benefit to it, but the idea that they're actually representing the people of Rhode Island by imposing this sort of not only the cost and imposition of the policies, but then the risk of being sued. And as you know, I've suggested that this extends to businesses, nonprofits, and probably individuals who may not keep up with the regulation. They could be sued as well, in my opinion, on my read of this legislation. Why would our own representatives put us in that position? It's mind blowing.
Okay. Hold on. I'm just finishing up. Okay. All right. Let's go back to our bill here and our bill page. And let's look at, what do you want to go to next? You want to go to the good or the interesting?
Well, let's do the good for a little bit of uplift after.
All right, give me a
such
bill.
terrible. So it's 5758.
Yeah, or
0552.
Okay, so these are two bills you said are good.
I say they're good, and I have to. The disclaimer is they're much less substantial than a complete rewrite of our rights through the energy policy. But these bills would allow Rhode Islanders to sell non-potentially hazarded food. That's mainly things that don't have to be refrigerated, that kind of jams and baked goods. So you could sell food, you could prepare food in your home kitchen, and then register. As long as you're registered with the state, you could actually sell that food. And I think this is probably the kind of legislation that
sell that food where? Just directly yourself, or
directly farmers markets.
How about a lemonade stand?
Yeah, I think you could probably do a lemonade stand.
There was some uproar on that years ago when lemonade stands were being outlawed because they did. So this kind of bill would allow that kind of activity, right?
Yes, I believe so. I always think of my mother-in-law used to make these wonderful stuffed quahogs, and we told her you should sell this, but she couldn't. the law would not let her do that. And it's just an absurd kind of thing. I think most people hearing of this legislation would think, how is that not already the way the law works? But
you still would need a license to sell food or something?
Well, it's more like you just have to register as and one downside to this, they do require that you adhere to what currently farms can do this kind of thing. There are special regulations for the amount of cleaning stations and that kind of thing. There's another bill, actually 5770 in the House. It's only got a single sponsor, Marzalkowski, so it's probably not going anywhere. But that would actually say if you're cooking in your residential home, you don't even have to follow that. So it's minimal restrictions. But I mean, in this year of COVID, when we've seen people trying to piece together a living somehow, this could have been a real strong suit for them to get some income if they could bake and make some money at that.
So again, just to be clear, somebody who makes food at home, it's called the Home Food Manufacture Act. So anyone that manufactures or cooks food at home, prepares food at home, can sell it to another retail outlet or directly to the public themselves with minimal government hassle, is basically what you're saying.
Right. And it would also, in doing that, would expand, because as I say, farmers can already do this kind of thing through farmers markets. This would expand their market. They could actually sell it more directly and I think to stores as well.
All right. So the House bill was heard on March 8th, and as always, held for study so that you don't know what's going to happen to it after that. And the Senate bill, are they companion bills or just similar bills?
Yeah, these two are companions.
All right. And the companion bill, was referred to the Senate Committee on Special Legislation and Veterans Affairs. They haven't had a hearing yet. Okay, interesting. So basically we got a little free market here going on, right?
Yeah, and it's got a few
and it's got a lot of left-wing sponsors.
Yeah, it's got some progressives on there, which is interesting. There is somewhere that there is some chance of cooperation and working together on these kinds of things.
Well, you wonder if it's because they're with us philosophically, or if they've just been petitioned by some people they know to let's stop this stupid prohibition on home foods.
Right. Well, I mean, some of it could be the identity politics, that sort of thing. I'm sure there are plenty of inner city folks and disadvantaged groups that would love to be able to make a little bit of money selling food they make in their home. Sort of like the hair braiding bill we've supported in the past. Just that homegrown marketing thing. So progressives may actually start to see once there's an identity politics hook in it for them, they might actually start to see the light on some of this free market stuff.
Now I'm going to put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this. You probably may not know, but whatever happened? Remember a few years ago there was a big debate about mobile hot food vendors, right? Mobile, the hot dog guys and stands and things like that. That wouldn't fall under this category, would it?
No, anything that you have to cook. I mean, this covers
non-cooked foods,
mostly jams and any things you can kind of leave out that don't have to be refrigerated so much.
Non-perishable,
bakeable things, some pies in there.
Okay.
But anything that you're having to cook, they still have those higher standards.
All right, very good. Let's go back and let's look at let's clear our reset the filter. And again, we have on our page, rifreedom.org/bills. You can look at all the bills that we're tracking. There's how many we got? 114. This is not comprehensive. We do not go through every, like Justin used to do. You loved it years ago, Justin. You loved it.
It's always the highlight of my year.
Justin, we used to torture Justin and have him go through, read every single bill that was submitted, decide which ones should be tracked. And that just was a little bit of a waste of your time, right?
Well, not only that, and it's almost like this session has become a nightmare because the biggest problem was that wasn't a waste of time. It was seeing what these legislators wanted to do. When you have to read even the bills that are going nowhere, it's depressing. Why would they even think of doing that? The problem is this year, a lot of those things seem to have a chance, and that's making it even scarier.
Well, some of the larger bills do, yeah, and that's the thing. We should talk about before we go back here is that there are so many bills submitted. 2,000-3,000 bills are submitted every year. I mean, Justin, I don't know what kind of glasses you use. You don't have any on now to read through all that, but my God, that would drive anybody crazy, and I'm amazed we didn't drive you crazy with that. But still. Not all of them get a hearing. Not all of them are ever going to come up for any kind of serious consideration, but you just don't know. The way we have hearings and hold everything for further study, even if you say, let's just look at the bills that had a hearing, still 90% of those are going to be permanently kept for further study and never brought back. But then there's going to be some small percentage, 10-15% of those bills that will come back in the dead of night. And you just don't know which ones. There's too many, it's a terrible process we have. I got to say that. It's a terrible process.
It is. And it's not designed to get things done. It's
and everything is at the whim behind closed doors. And then all of a sudden they're brought to light for 3 days, and then before you even have a chance to react, they're voted on and it's a done deal. 3 days is not enough notice for advocates and to ramp up, to get witnesses, to prepare, when witnesses used to have to come in person and all that. I mean, I can remember in years past, we used to try to, in school choice, get people to come testify for a bill, but we didn't know when the bill was until 3 days before the hearing. And, when you've got national people who travel a lot, 3 days is not enough time to get on somebody's schedule. Okay, let's go back to rifreedom.org/bills. And now we're going to look at the interesting. All right, what do we got here?
Well, these are not companion bills, but let's do 5013 and 0226.
Or
0226.
226.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's start with personal income tax. What do we got here?
I put this on interesting because we've had disagreements internally about this in the past. These both have to do with earned income tax credits.
Oh, okay.
The H5013 would just raise Rhode Island's amount of earned income tax credit from 15% of the federal version to 20%. For those who don't know, what this basically does is for lower income people who are working, it makes it so you don't pay as much taxes. You get a credit for working, and so you can actually get money back rather than owing taxes. And it also phases out so that you don't have as much disincentive to earn a little bit more money, which was a big problem and has been a big problem in welfare programs. Is you have that cliff. So in principle, it's a reasonable idea. So that's 5013.
So it does what? It raises it from what? From 15 to 20% of the federal number?
Yeah, this one just gives you that whatever 33%-ish increase in the amount of the credit.
So, all right. So this bill, as we see here, and again, you can all, this was introduced to House Finance, has not been heard yet. From okay, beginning this year. Okay, it would take effect upon passage. All right. So yeah, yeah, we have had some good internal debates on this. Is the other one close enough where we should comment on them after we review both of them, or should we spend some time talking about right here?
Yeah, it's pretty well. It's pretty close. So why don't I just
go to the other one? Yep.
So SO226, which actually has multiple sponsors, some of them progressive again. So maybe it has a chance this year. This one, rather than
sponsored the other bill we looked at,
Scott Slater.
Okay.
So this one, rather than just increasing the earned income tax credit, what this does is it actually works within the state's standard welfare cash assistance program, and it allows people who are on that program to earn up to 185% of the federal poverty level for 6 months or till their eligibility was going to end, without that counting as income. So it's a very similar kind of concept. And in fact, I think I might like this a little bit better because
I'm not sure I'm following. What does this do again?
So if you're on cash assistance and you start working, you can
EITC cash assistance, or
no, just regular
okay.
TANF is the federal one, but just the working RI, I think, is what they call the program now. So if you're on cash assistance, you can earn up to 185% of the federal poverty level for the first 6 months of your job and not lose
all right,
your
so
TANF
it allows for that. It doesn't make that cliff or that disincentive to go to work, right?
Right. It lowers that to some degree.
Yep. And does this have anything? This has nothing to do with your earned income tax credit, though, right?
No, it's.
Okay.
I mean, it's earned income, but rather than give you a credit for it,
yep,
they're building it on top of the
all right. So both
program.
bills are basically trying to provide some level of support for working families, right? Working
right.
families. It's not welfare to non-working people. Both bills would only impact working families, right?
Right.
The reason I like, and you don't agree with me fully on this, and that's fine. And most conservatives don't like the earned income tax credit. They don't like anything that's not totally free market, right? But we like it because I like it, the earned income tax credit, and modifying that, even increasing that, as long as we're doing it in lieu of raising the minimum wage. My argument is if lawmakers want to support working families, rather than burden employers in the private sector and take money out of their pockets and risk them cutting jobs, cutting hours of people if they don't cut jobs, let the government fund these families with public money, and then they have to prioritize that money in the budget by making cuts or not funding something else. So I like it. It's a government program, EITC. And again, I only support it if we also agree to leave the minimum wage alone. And if the government wants to support working families, then let the government support them. Don't ask private sector employers to support them. Your thoughts?
Well, I agree in principle. I think I'm just more skeptical that the government will ever actually do that. I mean, it's an old, free marketer idea is let's just give them this tax credit or a negative income tax. That kind of concept's been around for a long time, but it's not really a replacement for welfare. It's an addition. So it's just another redistributive policy built on top of it. And so if it were a package of bills are all built together and tied together as requiring the state, hey, maybe they could allow us to sue the state if they didn't follow through.
But let me put it to you this way: if it was packaged with no increase to the minimum wage, despite your misgivings on the earned income tax credit as a standalone bill, would it be a fair trade-off in your mind to take the earned income tax credit increase in exchange for not touching the minimum wage, if that could be guaranteed?
Yeah, if that could be guaranteed, I think that's probably a good policy. Of course, in the negotiation, they'd be demanding more earned income tax, and so the details would be important. But that's the correct direction.
The Senate bill, which would impact cash assistance. So I'm going to put it in my words and explain it and tell me where I'm right or wrong. Normally, if you've got two, let's say a husband and a wife both working, or one working and one not working, who's receiving, or one or both not working, receiving public assistance. Often, if you go back to work, the fall off of public assistance can often outweigh the earnings you make, right, in your new job, or at least provide a disincentive for going back to work. So this bill extends over 6 months the period at which that cash assistance might fall off, and it looks like it's designed to encourage people in that situation where one or both family income earners is considering going back to work. But we don't want to create a disincentive to go back to work. And you think this bill might help in that regard? Did I say that properly?
Yeah, and in my read, that's just what it does. Is it you work, you keep the money. And these things you mentioned, married couples. I've known, when I used to work on the docks in Galilee, I've known couples that didn't get married because then they would have lost their public assistance, that kind of thing. These things do create incentive, and so that's
Right.
one of the big things that needs to change.
Yeah, then one would have been All right. The Good, the Bad, and the Interesting by Justin Katz. Justin, thanks again for joining us. Love that tricorn hat. And again, tricorn, I learned from Justin, does not have anything to do with corn. It's short for corners, a three-corner cap. I never knew that. I never knew that before. How about that? Thank you, Justin. We'll talk to you next week.
Must have been that accent, the New England accent.
Okay. By the way, speaking of accents, folks, I don't even know who the ad is for. There's an ad playing on the radio. I don't know if it's a home mortgage, or they've got a woman on there who's trying to do some Rhode Island accent, and it's horrible. It's not Rhode Island. It's some cross between Maine and Rhode Island and England. I got to turn it off. I mean, do you know the ad I'm listening to? I mean, I'm just loud. We'll have to try to get the audio of that one somehow if you can, but it's just terrible. All right, Larry, the Liberty Guy, what's happening in Capitol TV? Should we take a quick look in? Anything interesting going on before we sign off here today?
Yeah, why don't I give you some quick highlights of what's going on while we were away. So Representative Filippi gave us an update and went over his opposition to the bill. Then the progressives fired back, and then Charlene Lima came in and strongly spoke out against the bill and the dangers.
Democrat from Cranston,
right, deputy leader, then Patricia.
On what grounds did she oppose it?
The grounds that have been in the email that's being sent to her by people across the state. So she went down a laundry list of reasons why this is a bad bill, from taking away authority from the General Assembly to higher costs for energy. She really gave a great presentation. Then Patricia Morgan came up and put in her objections to and that just ended moments ago.
All right. So keep in mind, folks, that the issue, the thing to handicap is not whether or not the bill passes. It's going to pass. But whether it passes with enough of a majority where a potential veto by McKee cannot be sustained. So to translate that to a number, if the bill passes with 50 or more votes, then it looks like it's pretty much a done deal. So a 50 to 25 vote would not be enough to sustain a potential veto. But if the bill passes with less than 50 votes, maybe even close, again, because some people still could be swayed in the next week or two if there's a gubernatorial veto coming up in the following week or two. But that 50 mark is the key. So when you wake up in the morning, I don't know how long this debate's going to go on for. It's probably going to be like another hour or two or more. You think all night? I think this is going to go very long from what I mean. There's a bunch of amendments. Each amendment can take 20, 30 minutes. And, I would just propose that Republicans just keep putting in amendments all night and force the other side to call it quits. Withdraw the bill. But Speaker, as we said early in the show, our inside sources said that Speaker Shekarchi has dug in on this, sent an email to his team saying, I want this bill to pass, make it happen. Wow. That means he's feeling the pressure from you, from us, from everybody else. So thank you for your support. But Ian,
Absolutely.
when you wake up in the morning and you hear about the vote, 50 is the number. 50 is the number.
Magic number.
That's the magic number. When we're not about defeating this bill outright, we're about getting enough opposition to sustain a potential veto, hopefully, by Governor McKee. And again, I got to be critical of the governor. He has said nothing about this bill. He has said nothing about the TCI gas tax. He has demonstrated zero leadership on this bill. A gubernatorial veto would have gone a long way in this discussion today. A threat of a gubernatorial veto would have gone a long way in this floor debate. But yet we hear nothing from this governor. And the tragedy of this for the governor is that he's spoken out for so many years about doing everything he can to help small business. This is a small business killer, this bill. A killer. The tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars to retrofit buildings, the higher energy costs, just to name a few. Many businesses use a lot of energy, transportation, delivery. Think of the manufacturing plants and machine shops and tool shops that use so much energy, not just lighting and heating and stuff like that. This is a small business killer, this bill. And it will be such a disappointment if McKee allows it to pass without a fight. And it's been such a disappointment, Larry, that he hasn't weighed in so far. All right.
Absolutely. Just one more update. Rep. McLaughlin, I believe Central Falls just spoke out, could be Pawtucket, just spoke out against the bill. So there is another Democrat in opposition.
Yeah, I think he was the only Democrat on the committee to vote against this bill. So that's not unexpected.
Right.
I believe, there are only 2 no votes in the committee hearing last week, Patricia Morgan, and I think it was Rep. McLaughlin. The other Republican, again, Bob Fung, for some reason, voted for this bill.
What a shame.
So anyway, okay, that's the update. This is big. We'll give you a final update. So tomorrow and then the dugout, after we give you an update on this bill, we're going to be talking for most of the show for a good portion of the show anyway, on the transgender legislation that would provide fairness in women's sports. You all know the story about allowing biological men to compete in women's high school and college sports. This bill would promote the spirit of Title IX, which has been a godsend for women's sports. This bill would preserve those goals and principles of Title IX by barring biological men in high school sports from participating in women's sports. It's the right thing to do. I mean, we'll have that discussion tomorrow with Dr. Michelle Cretella, one of the most outspoken, smartest pediatricians who has studied this issue tremendously. We'll have the sponsor of the bill to create fairness in women's sports, Senator Elaine Morgan, on to discuss it. And then we will also have later in the show, I think we're going to have Senator Lou Raptakis, a Democrat who also sponsors this bill, but we're going to talk to him about other legislative goings on in the General Assembly. So big legislative day tomorrow. If you get a chance to watch Capitol TV, tune in and hear the debate on the Green New Deal bill in Rhode Island. But we'll give you an update tomorrow. We'll see you at 4 o'clock tomorrow for In the Dugout. Mike Stenhouse. See you next game.